Stephen, get me set up for what could be a really murky flurry of earnings from some of these big banks.
Well, that's exactly right. I do think that the expectation is that you're going to have a lot of noise in the fourth quarter results. It's very difficult to parse out what's the core number of EPS that we should be looking at. But all the investors that we talk to, they really expect that the focus is going to be predominantly on the 2018 outlook and really taxes, and not just the benefit from a lower rate. But what are the second order effects? Does it drive a flurry of loan growth? Does it spur increased M&A? And then on the flip side, do we have to think maybe down the road what's going to happen in terms of pricing changes? Are we going to see increased competition that could ultimately dampen the return? So I think there's a lot of really interesting debate. Definitely one of the more interesting earnings seasons as we're heading in for the coming days.
So I think the question I would have is really about loan growth, right? And whether banks, if you take the tax cuts along with what seems to be easier stress tests, likely with Randy Quarles, Vice Chairman of the Fed, do you see banks increasing their leverage ratios? Do you see them being more aggressive in terms of offering loans?
Yeah, I do see them getting a little bit more aggressive on the lending side. From a deregulation standpoint, it is going to take a little bit of time to actually implement those changes. So it may be about 12 to maybe even 18 months before we see material differences in terms of re-leveraging. But I do think you are going to see, just based on history, when GDP growth accelerates, when the economy is healthy, and you have greater policy clarity, that's ultimately going to drive an improvement in lending activity.
Julian?
I think investors are going to have to be and get comfortable with the fact that earnings noise is going to be very high for the next several quarters. Get used to seeing the phrase X special items every time Bloomberg reports earnings, because frankly, we have theories about how taxes are going to be impacted. But it is really more theory, and again, as you pointed out, it's a question of how that money's going to get deployed, and we're just not going to know.